Trying to tell a story about how social media affect our private lives and do it in the form of a feature film. And in that, at that time, there were like this film is part of a set of 5 films that came out at that time, and the other 4 films are documentary films, and mine was the feature film that we did. And altogether were called Body Bits. So that was the initiative of the TV channel. And I had worked on this idea of connecting people, or what it means for a longer time in academia as a student, but also I did, for example, a short film, which was one of the first films that was told through Skype at that time, like we were talking, and I told the whole film through Skype chats, and I was interested in how social media and communication technologies would affect a new generation of people. And so that was the first initial idea for Pixelschatten. And yeah, so that's how it came into life, and then we developed it, and it had to be developed in a very short period. So I wrote the screenplay, I think in the time, it was maybe like 6 months, which is not a lot for a screenplay, as you might know. And yeah, I had the idea of a group of friends who were growing up in the same setting where I grew up in a small German town, and yeah, thought it was really interesting what happened if one of them was like a local a blogger or someone who had some local fame, but was not really like a really popular person, only in the area that he was living in, and what would happen if he lost his fame, and what would happen to his friends. So that was the initial idea behind Pixelschatten, to see how they would communicate and what would happen if you take the leader out of a group. And so it's a film about a group of friends, and I was really inspired by the films by John Hughes. You probably know Breakfast Club, and and today we have a lot of films who are doing that, but they're like very nostalgic. They're very much like, oh, we want to go back to the 80s. And I thought, no, let's do something else. Let's put like this framework, like let's have like similar archetypes, like the cool guy, the girlfriend, the artsy girl, and the nerd, and put them into this time, into an online context, and see how this would sort of turn out. So that was basically the initial idea.
And as we mentioned before, well, first of all, to all the people who are on the streaming, I apologize because we have a little bit of the problem with at the beginning of the transmission with the audio.
Okay.
No, but I will just reintroduce you a little bit in case that they missed that part.
Okay.
We're talking with Anil Jacob Kunnel. He's a film director. He does a lot of research right now. He actually works not only showing what he knows, but actually learning more about what he can share with us, with the knowledge that he discovers. And we were talking a little bit about his film, Pixelschatten. This was one of the films that I actually, the way that I got some information about this film is because it was mentioned and reviewed in an American podcast called The Film Talk. Unfortunately, that podcast is no longer available. That they finished the process. I really love that one. But I remember that when they mentioned it, was like, well, the story sounds kind of interesting. And from that, I was like, well, I was just asking myself and asking different media, where could I watch it? It was only available in Amazon Prime Video, but only in the United States.
Right.
And well, you can get it in different ways. Perhaps we will mention one way that you can watch it later on. And after I watched this film, it was really revealing in a lot of ways because, as I mentioned, of the cameras, it was ahead of its time. Right now, Michael Haneke has a film that has some similar points with this one, and we actually were mentioning that before. But for example, in TV shows like Black Mirror, or even The Orville, which is the Star Trek for made by the name of this creative animator of Seth MacFarlane, they actually mention some topics in one of its latest episodes where they try topics like the relevance of social media and the reputation that, for example, you can have in your personal life, and that's one of the main topics that you discuss in Pixelschatten. One question, for example, at that time it was focused more, and actually the name of the film is the name of the blog of the main character. Is that correct?
Right. Yeah, that's totally true. So we were actually creating a sort of like a blog that also had the functions of social media. Of course, every blog has a comment section, but how we like designed it, it's in the film, it's kind of a little bit abstract. So you get like an idea that it also works like as a social media tool. So we were interested in both, like what an individual person is posting, but also, I mean, it's a special time. It was probably a special time when you could reach a larger audience just by blogging. I mean, today you also have Tumblr and everything, but that's more visual. Like the diary part of it is a little like somehow gone in the in what we see today. Only like with very special or important people. But like the time in which we made this film, I think it was still like a big thing that you could have like people who would write their diaries and they would reach, as no ones would reach a larger audience. And I actually, I remember that in my studies, I wrote like a thesis, and that was like 2 years before I made the film, on autobiographies online. So I wrote this whole thesis on how people present their daily lives online. And so probably I got like a lot of inspiration from that academic work too. But in terms of how we designed the film, we didn't want to make it too concrete. We didn't want to use like a known platform, you know, like tell a story through Facebook or tell a story through a Tumblr or something similar. So in the way we designed it, because in the film there are a lot of like comments and you see like the other people commenting on the posts, we wanted to leave it a little bit open and just use this online space as an imaginary space that you would as an audience also set up in your head, and you would get an idea of how the blog would work. So there are a lot of different social media elements in it, not only like something like an old school diary blog, but also like commentary sections who can have their own dynamics.
And also, one of the things we are just right now seeing part of the trailer where we can see also the different styles, because one of the main characteristics on the visual style is that, for example, it's shoot as one video game as a first-person shooter, because you are seeing everything through the eyes of the main character. So you can also relate a little bit more about the actions that are happening, because we know that you can feel a little bit distant of the character if you only see him like an online presence, like only comments on Twitter or on Facebook or on any kind of social media. However, you are that character and you are seeing the effects that it has with the relationships that he has with his friends, with his partners, even with his jobs. Do you believe that what you were portraying at that moment still relevant and still reflects what is happening right now at this very moment?
Like in terms of how we use the camera, or in general?
In general.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, both. I think like when we started to develop the film, we sort of had like third-person point of view, like traditional film in our mind. And then I realized it's not like honest to what we would like to present. The first-person point of view is something that is much closer to how someone would write their diary or their blog online. So it's also very important because, as you know, I don't know if we can spoil it, but not everything that we see in the movie is happened as it is presented. So my question as a director and as a screenwriter was, if you could, hello, are you still there?
Yes, I am here.
Short break. My question as a filmmaker and screenwriter was, how would you present this person's point of view and make the audience care about it, even if he's first an asshole to everyone else, and second, if not everything is true. So the only way to seduce the audience and like make them, get into the state of mind of getting to know this person was through first-person point of view. And I think what's really interesting is that, I mean, we've seen like first-person point of view. I mean, it has a long tradition, and there have been sequences and also music videos. But I think making a film in first person, which is not like a video game in the sense that it's an action movie or something, but which is about like a group of people, about intimacy, about people arguing or relating to each other. That was really, really interesting because we hadn't seen it in that way. In order to make it work, it had to be you had to forget about it. So like when we were editing the movie, we were showing it to other people, and the most important thing is that they were not seeing the first-person point of view as a gimmick, but that after like 10 minutes they wouldn't think about it anymore. It was like very natural to them, and that was really important. It's not that easy to do that. You can really get very abstract, like you're watching like something that is made up. But yeah, like you can see in the video, it's the film shows very like a very mundane life, a very like normal life, and that makes it kind of special, I think. And in terms of how people use online media, I think that this idea that you are part of a film, that your biography is like a movie in which certain things happen. Like you can see that everywhere. You can see it on Instagram, on on Twitter, that people are conducting their own lives as if they were the directors of their own movies. So I think that it still holds on in that regard, and that it also has a lot to do with sort of narcissism.
Mm-hmm.
We have Pixelschatten, the main character, Pixel or Paul. He's kind of narcissistic, and he doesn't get along when people, start having their own problems or their own lives, and he doesn't get the attention anymore. And I'm not portraying it as something that is like that he's like, maybe he's an asshole, but it's not something that he can sort of control. It's not something where he could say, okay, I'm switching everything off and living another life. He actually doesn't know how to live another life without the attention he's getting.
Mm-hmm. And for example, that's another of the interesting topics that you are touching in there, because the life that we show online and in social media, in Facebook, on Twitter, in whatever medium that you're using, it's actually a curated life. It's something that you have that you have you're portraying the nicest part of yourself, and you touch up the consequences. And for example, you already mentioned some of these consequences with the main character, with Pixel, because you see him out of touch. He just want to be more present because of his narcissistic nature. However, he just forgets that people care about more things. But he's like, no, the most important thing is the comments that I have in my blog. People who care about me. That's the most important thing for me, but not because they care about me, but just because they are looking at me. So I am the center of any conversation. So that, as you already mentioned, it's actually one of the things that reflect on the way that you conducted the camera. I remember that there are also some pictures and some videos from the making of where you see about the rigging that you had for the films way before GoPro cameras were like really popular. How did you came with the idea for the stylistic use of the camera for the film?
Oh, that was a really interesting process. The credit goes to the DOP of the film, Mantas Jokos, and his assistant Clement Chelis, who developed this rig. Funnily, if you're DOP on a point of view movie, you don't actually hold the camera, right? So it was a lot of thinking about it and coming up with plans. So it was also quite a gamble, because up to the shoot we didn't know if it would work. But what was really interesting and really important to us was that, I mean, there is a difference. People who do point of view shoots probably know that there is a difference if you use a GoPro and it's on your at the top of your face, or if it's really on the height of your eyes. And we knew that if we wanted to have a very authentic feel, that we needed that sort of communication. And so we invented a rig which was really crazy, where the main character, Ben Gagak, the actor who played Pixel, he wore this rig with a DSLR camera on top, but behind it there was a sort of a VR. There were VR glasses, or like electronic glasses. So he would see everything. You would see the signal that would come out of the camera. So he could actually see everything that was right in front of him in a very natural way. And so we taught the actors how to deal with it. Because if you have a point of view movie, it's all about where the attention goes. And if you have another character, for example, Pixel's girlfriend Suze in the film, it's all about the chemistry between them. And so we invented this this new acting style where it's almost like they were interacting with a robot or something who had feelings. And it was really important to have this sort of chemistry that people could, even if there was just a big lens in front of him, still look them in the eye on the right height of the face. So it was a little bit more complicated than just putting a camera onto your forehead. It was actually a very complex way of finding out how emotions would translate, because that's really the difficult part, to see like if the character, on the other side is, I don't know, likes you, is not believing you, like the small accents and like, in human emotions. And so, yeah, you can see it on the screen. It was like a monstrous thing, but we used it to have like really, to achieve like really small emotions and really like, tender emotions and feelings. And yeah, that was quite a gamble. We didn't know if it would work, but it did actually work for the most part. And yeah, so
And it's interesting because, as we mentioned before, it's part of the story. It's part of the narrative
exactly.
that you're playing with, and it doesn't feel like a gimmick. There have been at least two other famous films, for example, that they
Right.
use the first person shooter. One is Hardcore Henry, that you can watch it
Yeah.
in Netflix, and there was another one, I don't remember the name, but Elijah Wood was on that film, if I'm
Oh
not
yeah,
mistaken.
he was a killer or something, right?
Exactly, it
I haven't
was.
seen both. Yeah.
But for example, in those, it's kind of interesting. I believe that it's similar to when you actually do a film on 3D, because part of the trick of using this kind of technologies, either if it's the way of using the camera or doing a conversion in post production, is that it has to be part of the story, and it doesn't have to
Right.
take you out of the experience, because a
Right.
lot of
Right.
films in 3D, if they start like throwing things to you, you feel like attacked. You feel that you are not looking at a window. You are not part
Yeah.
of that world.
Exactly. Yeah.
And it happens the same if you are like in first person, because it's like a virtual reality helmet that you are wearing, but you have no control of what's happening. So it can
Exactly.
take you a part of the experience. And in the case of Pixelschatten, it never happened. One thing that I will
That's
mention,
good.
and it's not a complaint, is that there are a lot
Okay.
of parts with a lot of text. And I remember that because it was
Yeah.
in German, and I had the need of using English subtitles, I was like, hold on a second, let me pause this because I have to read everything that's happening. However,
Right.
it comes as a part of the play, because that's the way that social media moves. It's the rhythm that our lives have right now. Or I am
Yeah.
mistaken? What do you think about that?
Yeah, I really like the idea of you stopping the screen and trying to figure out what the people in the film are saying. I mean, of course, we did like it's in German. You wouldn't have the subtitles, and then it's more fluid. But I think what we planned when what I wanted to achieve when designing these commentary sections in the film is that you would be, as an audience, kind of overwhelmed, and that you wouldn't understand everything, and that you would probably process things later in the film that you've heard like subconsciously in the commentary section 30 minutes earlier. So I like the idea of the whole information diffusion, that you like that's like this, like I read one review on the film which said that it's almost like a choir in the Roman, like in a Greek play, like you have like the audience commenting on it. So it's actually not a new idea for a film or for a dramatic sort of play. But in that context, I found it really interesting, because it's what happens. You don't get every information. But I mean, in designing the information, in designing these characters, each character that is commenting had their own story, right? In the film, they're all fictional and they have their own relationships, and also they hint in very different ways at the twist behind the film, or the real nature, what's happening behind the life that is presented online. And if you go through the film, you will find, I'm sure you will find each time new sort of information on what really happens. And I really like the idea that you could also rewatch the film and find new things. It's almost like a puzzle, but it's not just a puzzle. It's about human beings, about the friends that we see. But still, there are different layers, of truth in the commentary section.
Mm-hmm. And that's another of the things that it's really really interesting, is that the commentary section, in this case in the blog, it's something that actually helps to drive the reaction and part of the story. Do you believe that in any kind of work, for example, in a film or in a play, or in this case in a live streaming, for example, do you believe that the reception that the people have about the work and the commentaries that they can leave actually affect the perception that we have either of ourselves or of the work, in the case of a film, for example?
So are you asking if the commentary sections or people arguing over something can affect how we see things? Or
exactly.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's nothing new. Like in regard to films, I mean, critics were always very important, but they were gatekeepers. You know, like they would work for newspapers or television, and now it's like everyone can post their online review and maybe affect how other people are seeing. I think it's not a very simple dynamic, but the best example is how I mean, that's not like everyone, like if you have something like Rotten Tomatoes, for example, which has become increasingly important and people are discussing if it's really good to summarize a movie through what everyone has said about it. And you can probably say the same thing about users talking about films, and especially for feature films, word of mouth has always been important. You know, there are like these success stories of films that no one believed in, and then they got a good first weekend, and then people start talking about it. And so it's not something new, but I think the dimensions are maybe different. And of course, there's a lot of art today that is aimed at people talking about it, at the buzz, you know, that wouldn't work without it. So, I mean, every art is reference in some kind of way. And so people talking about it is an important part of it. Like, I wouldn't even say it's something negative necessarily. It's just there. And I think like in online communication, it's just louder.
And it's interesting because as we go along with the conversation and the topics, we can see that a dark cloud is surrounding you. Well, it's because of the time zone. You are getting a little bit darker and darker.
Yeah, exactly.
It's part of the pre-production that we were discussing, so it would reflect the topics that we were talking about. Yeah, right. And for example, I believe that it's also part of the experience because talking specifically about an audiovisual experience, a movie, for example, or a TV show, a lot of people, because it's more practical, rather watch a film on Netflix, for example, because it's really, you can watch it in your cell phone, but obviously it's not the same experience. And also you have, but however, you have an opinion about what you watched. And as you mentioned before, Rotten Tomatoes, Metacritic, and a lot of these sort of places, they gather a different opinions, and it's kind of sad because people tend to rely more about what the common smarts, the common knowledge of the people tell them that even perhaps about their own opinion about a work, in this case a work of art, if it's a movie or even an exposition, a painting or something. There will be people that right now I believe that if Picasso had an exposition with his paintings, and it would have a rather different perception. And we can see it even in cinema. Remember that, for example, for a long time, Hitchcock, even though he was a master of suspense, he wasn't at the top of the 100 films, well, at the top 10 of the best films of all times. And Vertigo, one of his films, actually has been for quite some time at the top of this kind of list. So it's kind of interesting how every different time can reflect on a work that was in the past. And that, I mentioning that because hopefully your film will have a little bit more distribution and will be having more exposition, because as I mentioned, it was way ahead of its time. So I seriously recommend.
That's really nice.
Recommend the people to watch it. And remember that if you are in the United States or if you are using a proxy server or a VPN, I am not recommending that, but I know that it's useful to use those things. You can actually buy and watch the film in Amazon Prime Video. And are there other ways where we can watch your film, Anil?
Yeah, like, you know, we've got like a screener online that, I mean, I guess like for your crowd, it's totally okay to share it. with the audience. And so yeah, you can probably put the link online and people can watch it. And I'll be happy if they share it or talk about it, because yeah, like you said, it's really interesting, because when we made the movie, we didn't plan to make a film that people in other countries would get. And the first time I realized that when I was also listening to the podcast you mentioned, and for the first time I was thinking, wow, people get it. It's really nice. Like and actually also like the reception of the actual audience was really nice in Germany. So I think it's also like, even if it has like all these fancy things like point of view and like a very, like almost like a multi-layered story, it's a film that everyone can relate to. So I'm happy to share it with people. And if you're in the States, you can buy it on Amazon.com. Yeah, so okay.
And remember, people, I will add the link for the video, since Anil gently gave us permission to share it. Just don't worry, don't mention to everybody. No, actually, share it with everybody who you think that actually will care.
So I cannot say anything on it, but
And one important thing: remember that you have to enable the subtitles so you can get, in the case of us people in Mexico, so you can get, unless you are very fluent on German. So you can get most of the story, because if not, it will be a little bit confusing, I believe. So I will add the link for people to watch it in the post where this is actually being posted. And one last question, Anil, before we finish transmissions. Are you working in a different project, not necessarily on films, but I believe that you are actually working on your next film, or something that you want to share with the audience?
Yeah, I mean, I cannot share too much. We talked about this previously. I just finished the writing of my PhD thesis actually today, so I gave it to the printing shop. That's what I worked on. But I also finished a new screenplay. Actually, two projects. One is an English language science fiction film. It's also about how technology affects our human lives, and it's about migration in the future, but in space. And the other thing is a German thriller on a hate crime. It's actually like a very political movie, but it's a genre piece, so it reminds me a little bit of films like the original Halloween, or something like Shotgun Stories. I don't know if you know that film. So yeah, these are the two projects I'm currently developing. Hopefully you will hear about them soon. And then I can tell you more.
And hopefully they will be released. Well, first of all, hopefully they will film first, and after that they will be released on a place that we can actually watch it. Because these kind of films, usually it's kind of sad, because you can either watch them at film festivals, and usually you have smaller distribution channels. However, now, thanks to the different digital uses, we can pretty much share it. However, it's still well, I was going to say a pain in the ass to trying to release, because distribution is one of the hardest part. However, now you have the reference, and please pay attention to what has been done with Daniel, and what he will be doing with his following projects. So, in case that people want to reach you, I believe that you still have a Twitter account, right?
I'm really horrible at Twitter, because I deleted Twitter a few years ago, and now I came back to Twitter maybe a few months ago, and I like you see, I have like 6 followers or something. So people can actually reach me through that. Yeah, that will be the most easiest way. So,
I believe that you know something about it, because you already made a film about the effects of social media. But
everything has their reasons. Everything has their reasons.
You know something that we don't know. And also, if people want to know more about your film, obviously you can go and just Google Pixelschatten. It's with double T, and you will see actually the trailer where you can get the poster, some of the production notes, more pictures, part of the making of. Actually, you can see it in there. And remember that if you like this film, I believe that one of the easiest ways to help you is to leave a review at the IMDb or even in Amazon, for example.
Yeah, or Letterboxd, or something similar. You know the channels. Yeah.
Exactly. So, as I mentioned before, I will leave the link so you can watch the film. And after you do it, please, in this case, we don't want the thumbs up at the YouTube channel. We rather want you to communicate that there is a film and that you like it and that it is this one that we are talking about.
Yeah, that would be really nice. Thank you so much.
Exactly. Well, Anil, it was a real pleasure. I really appreciate and I really thank you from my heart for the time that you had with us. It's one of the most interesting talks that I have had in a long time. And seriously, thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you for the invitation. It's really an honor for me to reach people in Mexico, and that you're loving the film. It's really good to hear.
All right, and remember, people, that if you like this kind of projects, we have a Patreon where you can help us, where you can support this project. We're doing a lot of interviews. Actually, after we finish this one, we will be getting in touch with someone in Spain to talk about a little bit about comic books. But after that, we have some other interviews talking about, and it will be great if we can get to talk with you, Anil, in a future transmission, perhaps about the other topic. Sure. Because I was really interested about your PhD research, so perhaps that could be another topic for a future interview.
Maybe that's good for another episode.
Exactly. Well, that's everything for the streaming that we have, and stay tuned because in about 15 minutes we will start with the next transmission. Thanks, Anil, once again, and thanks everybody for being with us.
Thank you. Bye.